All right, so, right, I am self-moderating this one. My name is Joshua Turcott. This is an idea about trying to merge or get Perl and civic hacking to want to talk to each other. So I have assembled a panel of people I know, and one guy I know has done civic hacking, to sort of talk about this. And I'm already having whatever. So here we got, this is in alphabetical order, they're not. We got Jeff Feltner, we've got Johanna, Randy Hill, here, Michelle Cove. If you guys would introduce yourself. Go for it.
Hi, I'm Randy Hill. A little bit about me as I work here. What do I do? I have 4 areas of business that I manage. The first is all the AV and all the buildings. And we have 6 buildings here. So I have own all the Christie's and all that. The other thing that I own here is all the websites, both internal and external. The other thing that I own is SharePoint. SharePoint is internal. And the final thing that I own is all the maintenance to keep all this equipment running. I have about 300 conference rooms, auditoriums, rooms like this that on a daily basis I have people like us in them doing something. And my job is, along with a staff that I've got, is to keep it up and running and people happy. So that's me.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Feltner. I'm a high school teacher at the Arlington Career Center. I've been a high school teacher for 25 years, and I'm going to assume that Josh asked me to be on this panel since for most of those 25 years I've been a free software activist, and while not really a programmer, I'm a high school teacher who teaches computer science. I have been connecting my students to the free software community since the early days of the web. And I'm active with the NOVA, CodeForNoVA group, which is the civic hacking group that meets locally around here.
Hi, my name is Michelle Koth. I work with Jeff and Randy, actually. We both work with the CodeForNoVA of Northern Virginia. And I would like to say, I guess I'm a civic hacker, but just kind of amateur, always learning new technologies, and really excited to learn more about Perl and talk more about how Perl interacts with civic hacking. And I work at the PTO as well as a patent examiner. I do not do software patents, though.
Hello, my name is Johanna. I've been doing Perl and database development for about 25 years now. I think I'm on the panel because through an effort called Open Nebraska, we did a tax increment financing, open data, civic hacking thing that I gave a talk about on Monday. So if you didn't see that, I guess it's on YouTube. I haven't seen it yet, but so I think I'm here for tax increment financing and my perspective hacking through the Open Nebraska organization and trying to bring public data into the public for making it usable for actual taxpayers to see where their tax dollars are actually going.
And I'm still nervous about this thing. I'm Joshua Turcott. I'm a recent transplant down here. I've been only here for a few years, but for the most of that time I've been attending their CodeForNoVA thing back when it was at the National Science Foundation. And I'm just sort of, I guess, an idealist or an activist overall. I keep thinking there are ways to use programming to really sort of get at all the things that aren't working, I guess you could say. Probably at a pretty high level, like government itself and whatnot. But we'll have a number of examples in this little panel of stuff that we have done, which certainly includes the Nebraska thing, and just examples. But I will lead us through a little bit of it, and then more or less, the more they can talk, the less I can talk, the better. So I'm going to cite Catherine Bracy, who gave a TED talk on this a little bit, and she went into a little bit on what is civic hacking, and she gave examples of, well, probably most of you think of some pasty kid in the cellar somewhere doing mischief, or anonymous, which actually probably anonymous really is civic hacking to a certain extent. It's just sort of the mischievous sort, but probably with an eye on their idea of fixing things up. But anyways, she says, mainstream culture has kind of fed this idea that hackers are people we should be afraid of, she says. Hacking is really just any amateur innovation on an existing system, and it is deeply democratic activity. She gives examples of what hacking really is, and you should probably be thinking about this along the lines of life hacking, not necessarily programming. For example, she cites Benjamin Franklin as one of America's most famous hackers in that, well, he was a prolific inventor. He basically never patented a thing because he essentially believed in open source before it was cool. She also cites, well, no, she didn't here. Was it Betsy Ross with the Underground Railroad was a hack? She included? Sorry? Harriet Tubman. Okay, I must have conflated two things, because I did see Betsy Ross in there somewhere. And one of the examples she gives, she has a few favorites. My favorite among her favorites was basically the Mexico House of Representatives. They had asked for or contracted with a company to get an app made to track legislation in the, out of Mexico City. And it was for, the contracted amount was for what was effectively $9.3 million, and they said it would take a couple of years to make. The citizens who knew something about this were kind of outraged. It would not take that long. It was not that hard to make. The price was ridiculous. So they sort of banded together, sort of pooled their money a little bit and said, we'll essentially offer a bounty. Anybody who can produce this app instead will win $9,300, so about 1/10,000th of the amount. And as a result, they got in 10 days 173 apps, 5 of which are in use today by legislators in Mexico. So they saved the taxpayers of Mexico quite a lot of money through this process. And she has other examples, like Ask Honolulu was one, where they saw a problem, people who were coming to the city or moving to the city who wanted real answers about the city or life in it. They made an app pretty much overnight for hosting those questions, but what they essentially did was a hackathon of writing answers to questions that people submitted. And in a matter of a couple of days, they had thousands of answers, and it was a process they repeated for various other cities. So we have a few of our own examples of civic hacking. I don't really have a preference on order, but the ones that come to mind were yours, the looking after the taxes, which I don't completely understand, so you'll need to describe that to some extent. I also had Alexandria Plays, I think, and the patent, Randy will know a lot about this, but the project to basically correct associations between patents that were filed based on grants that had been given by the NSF. So, I don't know, any volunteers?
And there's also Fix My Street.
Ah.
Has anyone heard of Fix My Street? Yes, you have, great. You probably know more about it than I do. Okay, well, I know a little bit about it, but I feel like it's a great opener app to talk about just real quick, and then I'll pass it on. But it is written in Perl, and it's been adopted by, in the UK, many municipalities in the UK are using this application called Fix My Street for citizens to report potholes and other road issues or trash, on the side of the road and whatnot. And I think there's a quote that somebody said that potholes are the gateway to civic hacking or some such like this, because it gets you thinking, well, what is civic hacking? Well, when your foot falls into a pothole or your tire gets busted by one, you're like, why is it like that? Who do I contact to get this fixed? And there you go. That's the citizen engagement aspect of civic hacking. So apps like Fix My Street make it a lot easier for citizens to engage with their government and report problems with their street. And it's amazing that it's been used throughout the UK. I'm curious a little bit, and I know actually I've seen in previous Perl conferences folks talk about this app too in reviewing stuff on YouTube. And I'm a little curious why it took off so much in the UK and maybe not so much here in the US, although that has to do with the community And a lot of civic hacking and a lot of projects that take off and gain traction and whatnot, they're very similar to kind of like an entrepreneurial startup model, if you will, where you have to like get people to use it, and you're doing metrics and making sure that it's viable, and new releases, and you're getting feedback and user design. So the community has a big part of that, like what folks are involved, what folks are able to contribute and act on feedback from local town folks interested in using like Fix My Street. So I find that to be a really interesting case story, but it's a good opener, I think, for getting people thinking about what is a civic hacking application. And just a little side note, here in the city of Alexandria, which CodeForNoVA partners with, we work with the city of Alexandria, and we work with Arlington County in developing open source GitHub stored applications freely available to the public. There's no, we do it on volunteer hours. And in the city of Alexandria, they do have some kind of like street pothole reporting system of some sort. It's a form. Maybe the form is processed in Perl. I don't know. I should find that out. But they're not using Fix My Street. They're not using something as comprehensive, I would say, as Fix My Street. And so it would be an interesting case study if anyone's local and would want to move forward with doing an implementation of Fix My Street with the city of Alexandria. That could be an interesting project. But at any rate, I just think that's a good idea, a good opener to get people thinking about what is civic hacking and how can Perl get involved and what is already using Perl, and Fix My Street is definitely one of those apps. So I'll pass it on. You want to talk a little bit about, you have an exciting, you wrote yours in Perl, right? The tax analysis.
Yeah, so the Nebraska TIF report, which you can find at nebraska.tif.report, it does happen to be written in Perl. I mean, so the problem is that there's a lot of income tax money that is being moved around, and people who are paying, or sorry, not income tax, but property tax money, people who are paying property taxes in the state of Nebraska might not know where their tax monies are going. And so there's a controversial program called tax increment financing, where ostensibly some of this construction is designated for low-income housing, for drug rehabilitation, for projects that would not otherwise get built because they're not economically viable. And so you can take this TIF program and you can apply it and get these programs constructed. But sometimes some of these projects seem to be high-income housing. They seem to be very fancy apartment buildings and things, and that's not probably what the tax base, what individuals thought their money was going to. So the argument of our project is, hey, take a look at your TIF dollars and see if you're happy about it. And if you're not happy about it, go contact your representatives and find out what can be done about changing the process of the decision-making process about future dollars. So, yeah. So what we did is to the state of Nebraska Department of Revenue Property Assessment Division has a website you can go to, and they have both in PDF format and Excel spreadsheet format all the data for the entire state, which is great. All the data is there in Excel spreadsheets, but we have to pull it down. We have to do some normalization, and then we have to throw it on a website so that an average citizen can just click on the county that they live in, click on the city that they live in, and then see a big list of all the projects, click the project they live in. And then, yesterday I was experimenting with Facebook comment boards for each of those things, so you could go in there and comment, and I'm not sure if that's a good idea or not. But anyway, hopefully get people engaged with, am I super happy about this money? Am I super unhappy about this money? Whatever that is, have those discussions on those points in an extremely easy to use. You don't have to know anything about technology. You don't have to spend 700 hours looking through spreadsheets and PDF files, et cetera. So yeah, that happens to be written in Perl. It's all open source. It's all on GitHub. My talk from Monday is all online on YouTube, is my understanding. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the mechanics or specifics of that stuff.
I got started with civic hacking 4 years ago now. It made me a nerd. I am not a coder by no means. I'm a cat herder, if you want to call me anything. So at NSF, I work for the CTO's office. The CTO said, hey, we're going to have a thing here in our building called Hackathon. And I said, okay. And I said, well, I'm not really sure what that means, but let's have it. So I started rounding up coolers and putting drinks and soda in it. And then I met Michelle, and we started getting candy. And I went across the street. We were at over at Boston Commons Mall. And so my job was to find the food and the orange juice and the breakfast and the donuts from Dunkin' and all that stuff. That's what I could do. Coding was something that I could not do. I would look at what they're talking about and had no idea what any of it meant. I came from the world of Oracle, and I knew select star from star. And that's about all I knew, and it would give me anything I wanted. I'd have to hunt through it to find it, but I could find it. So, but there's something that I found that I was good at doing, and that was coming up with ideas. And the ideas were just normal things that people would not think about until you would say it and they go, oh yeah, that sounds kind of cool. So I've got a few things that I either had something to do with or not. But we had one of the projects that we came up with was kind of interesting. We took, it's called Lobbyist. You can go to iTunes and you can download it. We take senatorial data and congressional data. We correlate it. We go to, we put it on your screen. You type your name in or the name of a person that you're working with that is a lobbyist. If that name appears after you enter it, now I, as a government person, am dealing with a lobbyist. That's a problem. So if they want to buy my lunch or buy my dinner or buy my drinks, I, as a government guy, can't take the offering. So what this app was able to do is we were able to put it out there so that government people could look and see who they're dealing with. Are you talking to a lobbyist or not? So that was one of the apps that came out 3 years ago. Before that, there was an app. If you eat in any of the areas in Virginia and you walk in a place to eat, you really don't know the quality of the food. Now, I grew up in the South in Alabama, and one thing we do is we rank the quality of our food, and we put it on the door so when you walk in, you got an A, B, C, D, or an F. I don't eat at F places. Y'all might, I don't. But you could walk into McDonald's and you might see a B minus. So one of the guys that works with CodeForNoVA down in Blacksburg came up with an app, and he and I worked on it a little bit down in Roanoke. And I can't remember the app now. I'll think of it later. But what this app actually allows you to do is you just put the URL in your iPhone, and within a 1, 2, 3, 4 mile radius, it tells you all of the eating establishments in the area. And it ranks them. And we came up with a ranking system. 80, 90, 50, 40. And it's amazing some of the places that you would think where the food would be good, but the food's not good. So what we did is we took the health care or the health department data, which is available. We correlated it, put it in an app, and so we tie it to your location. And the cool thing about it is you can run up down 81, and we have discovered that a lot of the places where you pull in to get gas and there's a little eating place there, I wouldn't eat at those places. would pass on those places. The food's just, 70, 60, 50. So a lot of that food is really not the best place to eat. Now, what we did that was kind of cool is because the state of Virginia doesn't have an A, B, C, or D, we created our own system. And our own system is based on the data from the healthcare. And that is, if you've got rodents or roaches within a foot of your food, then you're going to get a C. Okay? If you've got, we came up with all of these things, and then we created this scoring system, and we put it out on the app, on this app. Not like Alabama, where it's A, B, C, or D. We kind of created our own because the state of Virginia doesn't have one. So that was another little project that we worked on. The project that I spent an awful lot of time on before I left NSF and moved here was a project called the Patent Project. I had an idea, and someone else had an idea about the same time. And so she and I and others worked on this. And the project was successful. We had, I would say, 20 or 25 people work on it. And here's what it does. It's really kind of cool. At NSF, there are PIs or scientists that come up with an idea, a solicitation. And they put that solicitation out. And then a lot of people at the universities, MIT, Cornell, Rutgers, for God's sakes, Auburn, she went to Rutgers. Didn't you go to Rutgers? The community college center, right? I'm only kidding. So and I pick on her all the time. But we sent this out, we send this out to all the universities in the area. And the interesting thing is they then send back proposals to us. We rank the proposals, and then eventually a panel will say, okay, we're going to make this mic, and we're going to give you $500 to mic, and off they go and they make the mic. That's not the end of it. The end of it is actually here in the patent office. So after MIT developed the mic, and the university says, oh, we want to keep the patent in MIT, or we're going to give it to the scientist, and we're going to let the scientist take the credit and file the patent. So what we did is we decided, why don't we take the solicitation, the award, and tie that to the patent? And we did that, and we did it for 07 through 13, and we did it only for NSF patents. And so it's available. It's out there. You can go pull it down and look at it. We had Michelle and Jeff and all kinds of people worked on this thing, who ended up doing most of the hard work on it was TJ high school kids. And they did all the correlation. They're the ones that put the two together. Inside of a patent, and Michelle can tell you more about this, there's a place there where it says for government use. And in that patent application and in that solicitation and award for patent use, we were able to tie the two together so that the solicitation, the award, and the patent could be tied together so that we could view the scientist, we could view what university it came from, what science was really used here to create this this patent. So we put a lot of work into it. We worked on it for probably, I would say, a year and a half. 2 hours every Thursday night is about all we get. And that was another interesting app that we worked on. Now, there's all kinds of other things and ideas that I've come up with. Matt's working, Josh is working on a couple of things that we're going to get there eventually. But what is interesting is many people like you come to our hackathon or our hackathon on Thursday night, and they walk in, and part of what my job is is not to sit down and write the code, but part of my job is to understand the ones of us that are always there. Josh is always there. Jeff is always there. Michelle is always there. I am always, there's others that are always there. And I know what he does. I know what he codes in. I know what he's good at doing. And I know what Jeff likes to do, and I know what Michelle likes to do. And so when I talk to the people that come to our meetup, what I try to do is match them together. That's what I'm good at doing. One thing that we're working on now, and then I'll let Jeff talk because I can do this all day. The other thing that we're working on now is with a very tiny little computer. I know you guys all know about it. It's a Raspberry Pi. And Raspberry Pi is really kind of cool. So what we're doing with this Raspberry Pi, and I've started a meetup out in Herndon, and I've got 80 members, and I've only had 2 meetings. But everybody's interested in it because you can do so many things with a Raspberry Pi that's just fun stuff. And so one thing that we're working on now, and we're actually involving radio, is it's soil moisture in a plant. And eventually, we're going to put a watering device so that when the soil moisture gets between certain levels, the Raspberry Pi tells the watering device to water the plant. Now, I'm going on vacation here on Friday. It would be nice if that was built because I've got plants at home that are going to need to be watered and not by the dog, okay? Yeah, not by the dog. So there's a lot of interesting things that we get involved with at CodeForNoVA meetup, and we do all kinds of stuff. One thing I don't see, but I hear a lot about, but I don't see it. I see Java. I see CSS. I see Ruby. I see Python and the snake. I see Java. I see a lot of stuff and hear a lot of words that I don't necessarily know, but there's one that I don't hear, and that's Perl. And I often wonder why. Years ago, I worked with a guy who said he was a Perl programmer. I actually thought the guy had pearls around his neck. I had no idea what this guy did. And I kept wondering where his Perl was. He said, we're doing it in Perl. And I said, well, last time I was in Okinawa, we were digging oysters, and we were looking for pearls. Again, I'm not a coder. I had no idea what this was all about. So what Josh is trying to get to and what you guys ought to be thinking about is what can Perl do in the civic hacking world? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there. I talked to the guys up in Boston. They've created a app that kids can put on their iPhone, and it's Where's My Bus app. And so this app is really kind of cool. Kids in Boston are nuts. It's 5 degrees outside. They're in shorts. They don't wear a jacket or a hoodie. And they're standing out there freezing to death because they don't want to go to school with a jacket or long pants. God forbid if an 18-year-old or 17-year-old went to school with shorts, with jeans on, which you can't do, but they want to know where their app is. So what they've done is they've tied the app to the GIS on the bus. That then is sent to them so they know where their bus is at any time during the morning. So they walk outside and get on the bus instead of standing outside in 5-degree weather in shorts and jeans, or not jeans, but short sleeve shirt. So there's a lot of things that are out there, and I'm constantly on all the sites looking at things. What I don't see is Perl, and I don't understand that. And I've only started thinking about this because of this guy right here. He's a Perl programmer. I don't know what that means. I just know he's a Perl programmer, and like you guys. But I don't see the things like Java and Ruby and Python that I see kids doing today. And I don't know why that is. So that may be something you guys need to think about as you leave from here and go back to your homes, and is why they're not Perl programmers that are kids. And I got a whole story and a whole dissertation that I worked on at NSF that would kind of explain why that is. Questions for me before I hand it to Jeff?
So to follow up on, we have a motive here. I mean, I'm a high school teacher, as I mentioned. What keeps me involved in this is that I work in Arlington County. I get young folks who, by the time, the real good ones, by the time they're juniors or seniors, are better programmers than I am. So what do? I learned a long time ago, well, there's this great world of the internet, the web, and the open source community, that they can then just meet up with folks like you and go places that I can't take them. So Randy's not quite accurate saying that it was TJ kids. I had one of my students, really bright student, got hooked up with a mentor on the patent project. He's now at Georgia Tech. He's come back to visit me a number of times, and when he tells me when he got to Georgia Tech, he was way ahead of his peers there, because he was mentored by somebody who, on this project, where he learned stuff that high school students don't get to learn. Teaching is fun, so if any of you have that itch to want to work with young folks and help them, Alex is hooked on Ruby because his mentor was a Ruby programmer. If he had been a Perl programmer, Alex would be hooked on Perl. So there really is something to say for coming, if you want to grow the Perl community, to doing that kind of thing.
He learned it in 3 weeks, Alex. He learned Ruby. Pretty smart kid.
What I find really interesting, though, is that there are already some really large web applications. Because one argument could be, well, Ruby and Python are, they've got all these great web frameworks that are accessible. Well, Perl was the beginning. From what I understand, talk to Josh. By the way, he's a great evangelist about Perl. I'm learning a lot more about Perl, and we're about the same age. So when I was in college in the late 90s, I remember Perl being kind of the language you would use to process forms and to do web interaction activities. But I never really learned it a whole lot. But as it turns out, there are applications out there like LiveJournal, and Craigslist. Is that another one?
Yep. ZipRecruiter, a few more.
Yes. Yes. cPanel, I guess. So the question then is, obviously, and they are still written in Perl for the most part, right? It's not like they ever refactored their code to one of the more sensational, popular languages of the day, like Ruby or Python. And frankly, the reason why I learned Ruby when I was at CodeForAmerica, I was a fellow in 2011, is because that's what everybody else was doing. And that's what the mentors were that were around me. They were Ruby people, and I was like, okay, let's do this. But I think had I had more exposure, and maybe more of I guess maybe a more fundamental understanding of Perl's power and Perl's kind of benefits and some of the frameworks that are out there, and ease of learning and being better connected to the community. But it goes to show, you've got these really large applications like Craigslist, and they're using Perl. So, is it just that that Perl is a good language for listing data-heavy type applications? I'm kind of curious from the Perl community where it might be best applied in the context of civic hacking, and maybe Jay, you've got some comments on that.
Well, yeah, I think Perl is one of many languages that can be used. So in the Open Nebraska efforts, we had lots of different projects. We had a food inspectors program that actually won the hackathon that weekend. That was pretty cool. So they made a little app where, I don't remember what but they gamified it. They gamified the health inspection information for the state of Nebraska. So that was pretty slick. Yeah, Perl's one of many languages. Perl has a lot of great stuff. Every time I go to look at anything else, I'm like, well, I can already do this in Perl 5, so why would I bother? But, that's because I started in the 90s. So a lot of my efforts are, I don't care what language this is, let's solve this problem. Now, every time I walk into that room, I happen to, here's how you do it in Perl in 2 lines. So here's this great module on CPAN and, one line. So that's the perspective I come from. But if, they've already got it in Ruby on Rails or whatever it is, that's totally great. So, and I go to all the umbrella organizations, so any open source organization that is welcoming of all languages, that's where I end up. So I don't know if I answered the question or not, but Perl's great. Go Perl, yay.
Well, I'll cut in for a little bit then, assuming this thing still works. I've got a mic, yes. That's the thing is, like, the patent one was really on the top of my head with this whole thing, because I might be getting this number wrong, but didn't you find something like 8 times more relationships between patents and the grants given than you had previously known about? And this was just pattern matching. Basically, there was a form they needed to fill out in order to say, I just filed this patent or was awarded this patent, and it was in thanks to this grant. And they formatted the ID wrong, or they put it in the wrong field. It was buried in the text. It had dashes or it didn't have dashes, things like that. Perl could have done that very easily. And the only reason it wasn't is because there wasn't any Perl representation in the room that day. And this sort of goes into my pitch, so I'll probably do that now since I'm actually running out of time. You guys, I underestimated how much you've talked. So, I knew you could talk, but so again, I moved down here. I was sort of the big fish in a tiny pond. I didn't realize how bad I was at programming until I came down here. But so I started attending these things to help improve myself, and I've also started attending DC.PM, hosted by Brock, who you all know. And one of the things that often came up in between people having presentations was, gee, the attendance is down this month. There are fewer people showing up. The conference is getting a little bit smaller every year. Everybody who does Perl is so busy being productive that they're not out selling Perl to anybody else. They're very busy. They're very successful for the most part. And that's good. But as they retire, no one's coming in to replace them. Now, I was sort of gratified to see recently Ovid wrote a Quora piece about how at least it has stabilized. It's no longer in decline. It has found its niche. Python and Ruby aren't advancing on it really anymore, but it's still relatively unknown. So it's still falling? Oh, Ruby's fine. Well, I don't mind that. Shoot, I just lost my train of thought. Actually, Discourse is invited, but we are actually running low on time. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the idea. My thought was, or this topic had kept coming up, and when people showed up at DCPM, and we had people who, sort of from Baltimore and sometimes even down from New York would come and visit on a monthly basis. You'd usually get like one person who'd come by out of curiosity. That was about it. But it occurred to me that there was a sort of overlap between this one thing I was attending and this other thing I was attending, where the Perl community is very, very skilled. There are a lot of problems. Some of them don't even have a person asking for it to be solved. It's just maybe it's you. You're the person who has the problem. I don't like that thing. That's not working well enough. They've never even thought about fixing this thing over here. I wish that was better. And you guys have the skills to actually just make it happen. You don't have to wait for anybody else to do it. You can just go out and do it. Alexandria and Arlington have been very sort of open and inviting of ideas like that. And that sort of fosters this thing where you can provide them with a tool. They'll take over sometimes. I'm not sure if that's what happened with Alexandria Place, but
for one of our web apps. So we have an official memorandum of understanding with the City of Alexandria. So civic hacking projects can actually develop into sort of a mini startup, if you will. And it's interesting. Yeah, they really kind of all.
Yeah. But I mean, between that and guys who are teaching kids to get into this in the first place, if you hand over Alexandria Place, or you do some other thing to deal with the fact that the traffic lights at the intersection right up here trying to leave Whole Foods, and the 2 lights come in at the wrong time and it's stuck forever. just little things that you know are a problem, you fix it, you offer a tool, you talk to the town, and then you deliver it. It's essentially, did I go too far? Oh, yeah, I did go too far. Ignore this. So the idea is basically, it is equivalent to free labor, and people don't want to put in too much free labor. But then again, people also go to these meetups, which is not a paid activity by any stretch of the imagination. But a lot of these problems are not that hard to solve. And if you deliver a product to Alexandria or wherever, and it works for them, perhaps it costs significantly less than the thing they had or wanted to have, like in the case of Mexico City, you save yourself tax dollars, you're not being taxed as heavily as you might have, or whatever the difference is can go to something that you would rather see happen. And then at some point, they realize they want to make it bigger, or they want to add something, or they want to fix something, or change something, or just maintain it. And locally, you probably have people like Jeff who are training kids, fresh blood, to be interested in this stuff and be able to do this stuff. They go and they get an internship or even like a summer gig with their town. And what they run into is a Perl project. Instead of a Python project or instead of a Ruby project, they just, without really any one human being say, go learn Perl, they run into a project that has been done in Perl, and that's what they learn. Because they're certainly capable. They've picked up Perl, and essentially what you have is instead of -1 in the community, you have +1. You have one more person who is going to start showing up to these events next year and the year after. So it's sort of a symbiosis. That's what I'm trying to get at, is give a little here, get a little back, improve the community, maybe even lessen taxes, and get more people interested. Any further comments on that?
I think that's great. I mean, it sums it up. We have 5 minutes left. Do we want to open it up, let people
Go
know?
for it.
Does anyone have any questions? Do any of you have experience with civic hacking already? That's not a panelist. Okay. Would you like to speak a little bit about some of the projects you've worked on in Perl and civic hacking? I can pass you the mic. Okay. I don't know if the camera can get over there, but we'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear from our fellow civic hackers.
I'm Alan Noah, and you probably don't want to point the camera at me. Might damage it. I am administrator for a project called Sane, which writes scanner drivers for use on Unix platforms, and those drivers are often used for odd and esoteric things that I never thought of, including a project that I was sort of tangentially related to, which was to validate election results in one county in the state of California. That to my mind seems to be the most obvious place for civic hacking, is the fear of election results and the sort of thing. This one particular county, Humboldt County in California, was using the Diebold scanning machines, and so they actually had a paper trail, which is good, and it wasn't totally electronic, but they used my driver software, plus actually it's a Python program, to scan all the ballots after they had been scanned by the Diebold machines and the election results already reported. And what they discovered was that the Diebold machines have an off-by-1 error in them, and the first batch of scans is not counted. It does not appear in the results. And this didn't make a difference in any election that year in Humboldt County. They got lucky. They went back through those, and they were like, oh, God, they got lucky that it didn't matter. But you can certainly see in any individual precinct there being an election where that would matter. And, of course, Diebold, came around with a patch later that fixed this problem. But there was no independent tally. And this is a place where a civic project was able to come in, and actually they did more than just do their own tally and independently report the results. As a part of this process, they kept images of every single ballot, and they put them up on the web in a gigantic tarball where anybody could download the images and write their own software to go through and parse the ballots and make sure that it was properly scanned. So I really think that's probably sort of the place that you're going to catch most people's interest is election processing.
Thank you. Was there another?
Thank you. And I just want to add, too, that civic hacking takes all different forms, too. I mean, it's like you said, it's voting data. It can be playground mapping. It can be fixing potholes in the streets. But it's all over the place.
So I went down to Roanoke, and again, working with New River Valley, the hack group down there. What we found is if you go to right here, Alexandria, or to Arlington, and you go to the court and you want to put in my name, Randy Hill, and you want to find out what kind of trouble I've been in, if I've been divorced, if I've been a thief, how many speeding tickets I got. When you type my name in and you run the little query, yeah, eventually it comes back, but it just tells about that county, Fairfax or Arlington or Alexandria. So in order to get all three of those answers for all three of those queries, you got to run it 3 times. So what we decided to do is, and talking to Ben, we kind of flipped some things around so that all I had to do was put my name in one time, and then it went out to all the counties and ran a query and returned everything about Randy Hill. And so it hit all the counties in Virginia Beach. I mean, all the counties in Virginia, all of them. And then it would tell very quickly all the trouble that I've been in. I mean, because what was happening and what we found that was happening is the sheriff would run a query and he would find out that Randy Hill's only been in trouble in Fairfax. Well, that's not true. I went to Virginia Beach and I stole a bunch of stuff down there. And then I went to Roanoke and I went a bunch of places all over, and I was bad. I mean, I was a bad guy. I really was. And running up and down 81, I was speeding and getting all kinds of tickets in every county. But every time the sheriff would run the query, it only come back, he's only been speeding in our county, so I'm going to let the guy go. So very quickly, when we flipped that query around and it was able to hit every county, the people, the lawyers that we were talking to in Roanoke, I mean, they actually stood up and clapped because they could run a query on Randy Hill and give it to the sheriff, and the sheriff wouldn't let me go. He'd lock me up.
There you go.
And it was absolutely amazing. Now that is out and about and is being used. And again, that's civic hacking at its finest. So that we've got something that the county thought was going to fix their problem, but it does, but just their problem, not the entire state. So by just a little bit of work, they were able to look across the entire state, and they found out that, yeah, Randy Hill's a bad guy. He ought to be locked up. And look, I'm here, so for God's sakes.
Well, I think Randy's example is really helps to show that it's easy to get involved in civic hacking. You know, there's so many low-hanging fruit projects that you don't need to be a professional coder. I'm not. You know, I do it for fun as a hobby, and yet you only need to maintain it at a hobby level to really be actively involved. So I think that I think in terms of nurturing and incubating like a greater Perl community, civic hacking is a great environment for that. And with that, we'd like to welcome everyone to attend the CodeForNoVA meeting, which is going to go on tomorrow night, right here at the PTO. And
Madison, yep.
Madison, in the Madison Auditorium, and maybe we can discuss some Perl projects. That would be kind of exciting, I think.
This certainly, okay, sorry.
Sure, certainly. CodeForNoVA is a volunteer branch of CodeForAmerica. CodeForAmerica is a nonprofit based out in San Francisco, working in the area of citizen engagement, government transparency, and we sort of support that mission by having volunteer groups of civic hackers come together and meet on a weekly basis to work on open source civic hacking, civic engagement, open data applications.
It's got to be open because it's not just going to.
Everything's open. Everything is open source, data is open and available we have a repo on GitHub with all of our applications that we work with.
Yeah, and just to stress as a closing point, there hasn't been a single thing we've worked on that Perl couldn't have completely destroyed. It would have been fine for it. So it's just a matter of getting some people who prefer Perl in those rooms, basically. Right. Any further questions? Then thanks for coming.